Well, you probably hear the sound behind me, which was Fife and Drums Corps, and this is the music we are talking about. However, when we talk about music and militancy, this is indeed a great history we are talking about, and as the whole American nation is going to celebrate 4th of July after pandemic. So there is such a patriotism, there is such a rigorousness and excitement in the nation as we are all going to celebrate 4th of July. However, whether it's mystical exercises or military engagements, whether it's a political rallies or praise concerts, music plays an integral part of each and every human society. And especially when today we are talking about a martial music, we know that being a Christian, sometimes we oppose wars, we want peace, but Bible history and narrative, especially Hebrew scripture, are filled with all these kind of references where music played a great role in the story of the prophets and in the Bible history. For instance, the first reference in the Bible is a balance between a metal makers and a music makers, which is Jubal in the book of Genesis chapter 4 verse 21. The early human civilization has two kind of these extreme, one side soft music, the other side was the metal maker and the war industry. On the other side, we saw that how when God uh, delivered children of Israel, and when they fought with various nations, we saw the story of a fall of Jericho with the sound of trumpet with Joshua's leadership. And then again we find out that how King Jehoshaphat, when he was so terrified against the military invasion of the Midianites and Moabites, and the God's word came through a Levite that the musician and the singer from the Levitical families, they go as a frontliner. And even that, after that, we saw that there was a time when there were four kings gathered together under King Jehoshaphat, and they asked God's direction. And when they reached to Prophet Elisha, so Prophet Elisha asked that bring a musician for me. And when a musician came, God's hand stayed upon him and he told them what God told them. So we see that this is a brief history, and I don't want to take more time for a history lecture. We have an eminent teacher, performer, and a good friend, Kathleen Dyer, with us. Kathleen, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Sarwar.
Well, Kathleen is a good friend, and her husband. They both are very good friends and a very good musician as well. We both are member of the Bethany Christian Reformed Church here in Southern California, and also Kathleen has been a couple of times at our Psalms Festival, Zabur Festival, also in the Artesia City Indo-Pak Church. But today we are talking about fife and drums. When last week when we were gathered together, and she told me about fife and drum, and I heard that music a couple of times as a music researcher and ethnomusicologist. I never realized before that what is the importance of fife and drums and the flutes, and especially in the martial music. So, Kathy, would you please tell us something about, especially your personal journey as a musician, and why you picked flutes?
Wonderful. Glad to do so. Well, first of all, my father is was a career Army officer, so I grew up listening to military bands at every festival, every holiday as a child. We were stationed in Germany, and I had a beginning in the recorder in German school. And then when I came back to the United States in late grammar school, the public school system, California public school system, introduced the instruments. And I actually wanted to play the clarinet, but they ran out. So I came home crying and said, I have to play the flute. But God had amazing opportunities ahead with that. So in high school, the tradition of the American marching band is more popular for the older students, maybe a concert band for children. And then in high school, you do marching band to accompany the American football games. And so for 4 years, I did a role, what was called the drum major, which I did not play a drum, but it's basically the leader, the student leader of the marching band. Then in college, although I started on my flute, and this would be the concert seat flute, playing things like this as a child. The progression to piccolo, then, which is the piccolo flauto. In Italian, this is called piccolo flauto. We just call it a piccolo. It's one half the length of the flute. And this is made out of African blackwood, the same instrument that you would play, same wood that you make clarinets and oboes out of. And so in college, I started playing classical piccolo with at Cal State Long Beach, which is where I went. And the piccolo sounds like this. And later in my career, I was offered the opportunity
Yeah,
to.
Kathleen, I think we missed the sound because we forgot to change the sound, I think, option.
Okay, I'm going to put. Okay, try it again.
Yes, perfect, great.
That's the sound of the piccolo, also in Italian called the piccolo flauto, the little flute. And so for many years in concert orchestra setting, I played piccolo. Then in 2010, I was graciously offered by Azusa Pacific to do something unique, and that was um, receive a master's degree in piccolo, which is considered an auxiliary instrument of the orchestra. So during my 2 years at Azusa, I focused very heavily on every single thing that I could about the piccolo, including the historicity of how did this fife, this colonial fife, become a piccolo. And that journey is absolutely directed by martial music, by the
Hmm.
fife and drum. So the fife and drum tradition starts in Sweden and Britain very beautifully. And you might think of first in our US history the colonial. I have my little colonial guys here. The tri-cornered hat, the red coats. The colonial music would have been the music of the fife and drum, where it would be like two musicians for a group of 75 soldiers. Um, and that music is, it sounds very European because most of the people in our colonial wars, Revolutionary War, were in fact immigrants. And so I'm going to play a little bit on the fife of a music that you might have heard on colonial fife and drum.
Hmm.
So that has a more regal sound. Whereas when we move into, I also want to show you, this is a fife and drum collection of revolutionary music. So when I was studying it, though, I became more captivated by the music of the Civil War.
Hmm.
So the Civil War music is very, very tied to American folk music. And I wanted to differentiate that folk music basically tells the story of a people. And American folk music has two very big categories. One of them is the songs of the American Civil War. And I wanted to, for our listeners, because we're far and wide, I wanted to describe to you the Civil War was the battle for the right for slavery. And I wanted to list to you the states that were included in the South. And those would be Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. That's our southern states. And then the northern states were Maine, New York, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kansas, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and even California, Nevada, and Oregon. Those were our northern states. And General Robert E. Lee himself, who was the Confederate general, said, "We couldn't have a war without music because the music was such an integral part of the daily life of a soldier." For the singing, um, there were small books called songsters, and I have one similar to it um, where the music was printed and it would tell the stories of what was happening in the battles. Civil War folk music has very sad ballads, it has very jubilant songs to encourage the musicians to rally them together. And often you would hear that a soldier would carry his Bible and his songster with him everywhere, and the men would sing together to keep encouragement.
Well, thank you.
Um,
So, as we talk about your personal story and how this American folk music linked to American Civil War, so as someone says that if you want to know the history of a nation, find it in their songs. And Fife and Drums is one of the perfect example for that quotation and that understanding. But however, also music serve as a communication code. Music also serve as to infuse patriotism and also encouragement, as well as engaging emotionally and technically both in the war field. So what do you think? What was the main purpose of fife and drums in the American Civil War?
Very good, very awesome, interesting topic. Um, so there were two types of functions of the fife and drum. One was order in the camp. The songs, there was no loudspeakers yet. The songs would tell the musicians when to get up. That would be something called revelry. Um, when to go to eat, when to go to church, um, any type of a roll call, when to check in for sick call, and even the different commanders had a different tune. Um, and I wanted to share a book that shows those tunes, that they were written out and these young musicians would memorize them. So number one was order in the camp, and number two was their to arms, and that would be anything that was in the battlefield. Now, maybe you've heard of a bugle, drum and bugle corps. Those would be the infantry on the horses, on the cavalry, because you could play them with one hand. And fife and drum mostly accompanied infantry on the ground. And their job was to say one particular tune for turning right, another tune turn left, another tune retreat. And all of them were responsible for memorizing these melodies and played an integral role at a time when there was no phone, no radio, no drone to direct them. And One of the reasons I named the states is because if you've traveled back there and you imagine those battlefields in the dense forest
Hmm.
and these men, um, you know, some of them had never left home more than 20 miles. This was a very early time of our country where travel was difficult and was contingent on weather. So the music help them learn about each other through the folk songs and also help them on the battlefield itself to be safe and protected.
Well, that's great. So, what I heard here are it serve to enhance memory of the young soldiers. Then it serve as a communication, and we all know that there are verbal and non-verbal communication code. Today the communication specialist, they have found out there are 12 communication codes, and music is one of that verbal and even non-verbal communication code. So that's powerful, that how at the time when there were not a high-tech communication activities and gadgets, how music served as a communication code. But also you told us that it was also order in the camp, and or not only order in the camp but also in the field, actually music helping them for their directions and also follow their the activities during the day, as well as with all this fife and drum. So fife and drum was not only just a tune and melody just for the sake in the war, but it has a multi-facet purpose which were serving over there. But however, we talk about you were sharing about the fife and drum came from the European colonials in the USA, and then how it has played an integral role not only in the Civil War, but can you explain a bit of why drums and flutes? Why there is not anything else added? What is the significance of flutes, whether it's a pitch or because drumming in the war is very ancient and it's global. But generally, we see in the biblical narrative probably because of a high pitch, because trumpets mostly used in the biblical narrative, but what do you think? Why the flutes in the fife and drums?
I do feel it is the power and the volume. Literally, you can hear it from miles away, and so therefore it was a tool. It was a useful tool because it could cut high above the sound, above any sound barrier.
Okay, so it means like, yeah, as you were telling, I saw a one movie clip. I think I don't know what was the name of that, but I saw that how the insurgents in the thick forest, how they were communicating with whistling each other, even
Mm.
in an Indian forest. And I think in any culture, the high pitched sound, whether it's a human whistle or a bird sound or any kind of, so piccolo and flutes help actually in the.
So my husband David, he feels that maybe there were some piccolos at Jericho.
Oh, okay. Well, we take it as a.
He
Thank you,
doesn't
Dave, for
know
sharing.
that.
Anyway, so what is the significance of the fife and drums in the July 4th celebration?
Oh, very, very wonderful question. So, um, I have been fascinated that although war is sad, we still want to hear the marching band music in the parade. It it makes us feel stronger. It's inspiring. And of course, the central parade to the American tradition is the Fourth of July parade. And now remember the years of the fife and drum excuse me, of the Civil War were 1861 to 1865, 4 short years. And 1862 was the first time we celebrated the 4th of July formally, although there had been many unofficial ones prior to that. So, when I decided to start a fife and drum band, I wanted to tell you about a young boy in history who was only 11 years old, and his name was Willie Johnston. And Willie Johnston was in a battle that um, began up in Pennsylvania and ended 153 miles later in retreat. And um, one thing about the musicians is that they would often become makeshift medics when soldiers were being attacked. The fife and drummers had opposing colored uniforms, so they would it was a code of honor. The saying, "Don't shoot the musician." The musician would not be shot. So they were often last man standing and often last boy standing, and they would be helping carry people off the battlefield who may still have a chance to live.
Mm.
So this young boy, Willie Johnston, on the 1st of July, he actually carried his drum 153 miles when all the men had deserted and left their instruments behind. And again, he knew the value that this tool was, this drum was. And so on the 4th of July, 1962, he was able to be the only musician marching in the 4th of July parade. And for that honor, Abraham Lincoln awarded him the Medal of Honor. Sometimes you hear it called the Congressional Medal of Honor, but the Medal of Honor of Valor to the youngest recipient of all time, this little boy who did this for our country. So that is why I have named my 2022, well, I've had the group for a couple years, the Willie Johnston Fife and Drum Corps.
Wonderful. Such a fascinating story about resilience and commitment and a duty to one's nation and for their country. So you were telling me that Abraham Lincoln. So that was 1862, the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
1862, and then Abraham Lincoln. I have watched a couple of other videos where this Fife and Drum Corp is a part of global tours, even the Queen's coronation, sometimes in the presidentials, and even internationally. So you are, oh, what is the contemporary role beside war of this Fife and Drum Corp in the peace era? Do you have any glances in that
That,
situation?
yes, and I wanted to share with you something very special I got on eBay, which I'll hold up, which I was absolutely thrilled about. And this is a post war compilation of the tunes of the fife and drum. So you can hear, like they would write, you might recognize this from horse races, for example. Assembly, it's called. All of these tunes that told the musicians what to do have been preserved. And now you are right, there is still the oldest um, company of the United States military is called the Old Guard, and it is composed of fifers and drummers, and they would be playing on true fifes, not piccolos, and that's called the Old Guard. And definitely every inauguration, every civic event in Washington, the Old Guard will be playing. And so yes, people definitely try to keep the tradition alive because we have to remember the tradition had to be started with great meticulousness. There were two schools, one in New York, and it was called Governor's Island in New York, and then the other one, the School of Practice in Kentucky, and that was called Newport Barracks. In the beginning, they had to be trained very, very well in order to be this young person going out into war. And now we sustain it after wartime in times of peace for tradition and inspiration.
Well, that's fascinating story, and it's remind me again that how their red coats and their drums were communicating during the war that we are not here to fight. We are here to encourage and to the discipline and to the communication. But also now what I'm hearing in the post-war zone, it was also a pedagogical purpose of this fife and drum corps. And I was reading that there is a certain age in few schools, and they design a curricula in a way that they said that we don't enroll if you are not a 10 years old, and from 10 years old till I think the graduate class till the next 6 year, they have designed a curricula. So do you are you aware about these kind of schools, and why the 10-year age? Is that linked to the Willie Jones, the young boy who played the drum, or something, or can you reflect on that bit, on that? What is the pedagogical discipline and for passing to the next generation of fife and drum tradition?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Eric and Pastor. I'm going to share that with my students, that the musician was inspiring the soldiers, and I'm going to really share that with them when we prepare for the 4th of July. Um, it's hard to imagine in our mindset, and me, even as a military daughter, who my father fought in the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and he had a wonderful, wonderful work in the military. But it's hard to imagine me longing to send my son Walter to war, like thinking that was something to be very proud of. But in the Civil War time, sending your son to war was a sign of honor. And the simple fact was the little ones could not fight because they were too small. So it was very common for a 18, 19, 20-year-old big brother to take his 10, 11, 12-year-old brother to war, and the little ones would go to these two schools in Kentucky, the Newport Barracks in Kentucky, or Governor's Island if you were in the north, to study. And I really encourage anyone watching to do a Google search on the beautiful young musicians of the Civil War, the fifers and drummers. And they look like they would just be, they're just 10, 11, 12 years old. They're so young, and yet they were so important and so brave, and you see their little faces, and they just have seen so much in war.
Yeah,
um,
that's
so
that's already heart-touching experiences when we see so young people. But can you explain a bit now the dynamics of the fifes and drums musically? So how they divided and what they play, and can you demonstrate a bit through your flute?
yes, I certainly can. And one of the things in my one book that's what is really wonderful, as that they would put the fife on one side and the drum on the other, the sheet music. So here would be the score, and here would be the score. Um, and would you like me to do Battle Hymn of the Republic
Yeah,
on
that's
the?
fine. Yes.
Okay, great. Battle Hymn of the Republic was, of course, a renowned song by composer Elizabeth Howe, who wrote Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory of the Coming of the Lord, and it became one of the most important ones of the Union of the Northern States. So I'll play a little bit of that, and I have a recording of the other fife part here as well.
Wow, beautiful. So this is the flute part and the drums. Why there are five? Why you call? I thought it's a digit five, but it's not digit five. Mostly people misunderstood that. So it's five with the Fife.
Mhm.
So what is the meaning of five? And drums it easy to understand, but why five? What is this?
Fife is the British derivation of flute. It's
Okay.
an old term for the flute. So
Okay,
it's
got
just
you.
very simple, no keys. A fife has no keys. It's simply six holes and a tone hole at the top. Um, Mine is a replica, and I also have a maple one, and they have the very distinctive brass tip at the end of each one.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Kathleen Dyer, for giving us this important information about fife and drum history, its role and its significance not only in the American Civil War but also in the post-war era. And as you are performing this for July 4th, where are you performing this July 4th?
So, the Huntington Beach, the city of Huntington Beach it boasts the largest 4th of July parade west of the Mississippi. And I formed this group, and we've done like the Seal Beach Christmas Parade and never Belmont Shore Christmas Parade because it always conflicts with my Nutcracker. But I heard about the 4th of July Parade several years ago, and we've been performing with them. And we gather on PCH in Maine, and then we make the big turn up Main Street and go all the way to Yorktown. And if you are unable to attend, they do broadcast it on Channel 7 KABC at 10 a.m. on the 4th of July.
Wonderful. And I am planning to attend that one, and I would like to invite you, if you don't come by self in person, watch on Channel 7 and the beautiful corp, which is led and designed by Kathleen Dyer. So, Kathleen, what is the message to the contemporary generation? What do you think that as a musician, teacher, and a flute player, and especially at this 4th of July, we all know the American nation is known for its patriotism, and even our churches has flags. You know, even I have this little flag with me here. I am celebrating July 4th with everyone. So what do you think? What is the message of the fife and drum? If you would like to say one or two words to our viewers.
I would like our musicians to know that they really have a purpose, and the martial musicians in our past have been so brave to promote music in the most horrible, terrifying, life threatening situations, and they kept, sorry about that, they kept playing, they kept inspiring. And when my students balance the weight of what is stress, what is anxiety, how does my music both comfort me and comfort others? I want them to remember the many heroic musicians in the past who gave their lives, gave their all to support difficult causes, but to be an inspiration along the way.
Well, thank you very much. So we all know that music is a beautiful gift which God has given to us. And as we learn through this story and this conversation about how it serves as a memory and keeping our memory alive, it is as a communication tool, it is as a pedagogical tool, and as well as it is like keeping our history alive and passing it through the next generation. And music is a vehicle where we believe and feel that when everybody probably leave you, it will stay with you. And the one powerful gift which we can give to anyone is a gift of music. And from a spiritual perspective, now I'm quoting one Indian. It is not a flute, but it is shehnai. Shehnai is a wind instrument, again with the family of flute, but it has a different sharp tone. Primarily, it played at weddings in Indian Pakistani context. So it has a flute, but like flute go from like this one, but it goes straight. So
Okay.
straight, and it has a open mouth like this one, small shehnai. It's called shehnai, and one of the Indian famous shehnai player. He's a Muslim guy. His name was Ustad Bismillah Khan, and he born March 21st, 1916, and died 2006. I'm quoting him, and he said, "Music, let me forget bad experiences. You cannot keep ragas and regrets in your mind together." So ragas are a musical scale of Indian musicology. So we can see that how music, even in the time of horror, in the time of a mourning, and a resentment sometime probably, and regrets, music uplift our soul and help us not only to humanity but also to serve our God. So Fife and Drums Corp teach us a lesson that how they were non-combatant part of the nation. However, not only they were lifting up the soul and the emotions of the soldiers, but they were also helping wounded soldiers, and they were keeping the morale of the nation as they were fighting for the freedom. So that also gave us that a musician, as Kathleen says, musician has a great role to play in every part of the walk in the society. I saw another post this morning. Someone sent me a soldier was sitting with his gun on the side, and he was playing a left hand a piano. So he was holding a gun on one hand, and he was playing a piano. It was an image, but it shows that whatever external situation is you, music inside you will always keep your humanity and your softness into you. May God bless you as you celebrate July 4th, and don't forget to watch Kathleen's group of young musicians as they are playing this 4th. Happy 4th of July to everyone, and I would like you to wave this happy July 4th flag. Thank you. God bless you all.